What's the most eco-friendly coffee you can buy? We dive into the world of coffee production and try to find out with the help of an expert. Also, hidden caffeine, where to find it and how much of it you should be consuming on a daily basis. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Welcome to Globe Now. Coffee is grown in the South, shipped north, often roasted here in Canada, and then packaged. And presto, you have your morning cup of coffee. But consider this question that comes by way of a reader. What is the most eco-friendly coffee I can buy? Well, it's part of Canada Q&A project where you get to ask the questions and we answer them. Well, to tackle this question, we've contacted Stuart McCook. He teaches at Guelph University and he has written about the history of coffee. Hi, Stuart.
Good morning.
I imagine there's a short answer and a long answer. What's the short answer?
The short answer, I would say, is to buy bird-friendly coffee that's been certified by the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center in the U.S.
And is there one particular brand that does that really, really well, or are people just going to have to look for that certification?
If you go to their website, which is easily available online, they have a list of roasters that will carry their coffee, including a number in the Greater Toronto area. Okay,
so that's one certification, but I've also seen organic certification. I've seen fair trade certification. Right. What is bird-friendly?
Bird-friendly is based on organic certification, that is the United States Department of Agriculture organic certification, which is already very stringent, to ensure that over the coffee farm there is forest habitat that is diverse and suitable for migratory birds.
So the bird-friendly aspect of it has to do with the farms, the trees, and the birds. In other words, there is a practice in the coffee industry where they cut down the trees. Is that the idea?
Yeah, in the 1970s, in particular in the 1980s, there was a move to what was called sun coffee, where what they did was they cleared out a lot of the forests under which coffee had historically been grown and started planting high-yielding varieties of coffee in the open sun. The loss of forest cover, though, also implied the loss of habitat for migratory birds, and this prompted a reaction from ornithologists in the United States and other people concerned with environmental change in Central America.
So this bird-friendly certification that you're talking about, is this basically accepted? Is there a consensus that this is the gold standard?
I would say yes. Beneath that, I think the official USDA certification, which is also accepted in Canada as a similar level of certification, is in fact the gold standard. One of the problems or challenges of this being the gold standard, though, is not very many farms meet the certification. So the volume of certified bird-friendly coffee is fairly limited.
Right. I'm curious, if something is not certified, is it bad?
Not necessarily, but I think the answer is we as a consumer, we as consumers do not know anything about it. So it is possible, for example, that coffee farmers adhere to all of the standards of certified organic standards, but there's no way really of knowing that.
So in other words, there are inspectors that visit the farms that assess, whether they meet bird-friendly, organic, fair trade.
Right, and there's often very strict sets of criteria that the farmers have to meet. And for USDA certification, you're looking at an annual inspection.
I'm curious, how important is the eco-friendly label to you?
I buy it very religiously. As a historian, I study the environmental history of coffee, so I'm very interested as a researcher in the longer-term issue and longer-term issues of coffee and environmental change. And so I buy it religiously. I've got a cup sitting beside me right now.
Okay, and we have to talk about Tim Hortons, McDonald's, and Starbucks. Is there one that's more eco-friendly than the other?
I couldn't tell you offhand, but one of the things I could encourage your consumers to look for is to look for certification labels of one sort or another. It's less common for the large producers to have certification labels, but there are some that are becoming increasingly common. So, for example, Rainforest Alliance certifies sustainable coffee, and I believe at the very least 7-Eleven carries Rainforest Alliance certified coffee. Now, one of the things that I would encourage your audience to do, though, is check in and see exactly what those certifications mean. If they're interested, I would encourage them very much to go to the blog coffeehabitat.com, which is written by a bird ecologist at the University of Michigan. And she gives a very granular look at the various certification standards.
Okay, Stuart McCook, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Well, we want to hear from you. How important is an eco-friendly label to you when it comes to choosing coffee? And who would you rank at the top? Well, we've been talking about coffee production, but what about caffeine? And how much of it should you be consuming in a day? The Globe's Carly Weeks looks at hidden caffeine and how many of us are exceeding the daily recommended intake.
Coffee isn't the only place you'll find caffeine. In fact, energy drinks, chocolate, and even some pain medications all contain various levels of caffeine. In some cases, like with coffee and chocolate, caffeine is naturally occurring. But manufacturers add it to other products like energy drinks, carbonated soda beverages, and even some types of fortified water. But how much should you consume, and are you getting too much? It turns out it's not always easy to answer those questions. Health Canada advises the average adult to get no more than 400 milligrams a day, about 3 cups of coffee's worth. But manufacturers don't have to state how much caffeine their products contain, which can make it a challenge for consumers to know if they're staying in the limits. Some health experts say that's a concern because certain groups, like children and adolescents, can be negatively affected by excessive caffeine. Concerns over high amounts of undeclared caffeine in energy drinks was enough to prompt changes to labeling laws to increase transparency. That's the exception, not the rule. Overall, Canadians get 80% of caffeine from coffee, and more than 1 in 5 men and 15% of women exceed the maximum recommended caffeine intake on a daily basis.
Well, that's all for today's show. If you've got a moment, hop onto Twitter and let us know what you thought of today's program. And for any questions that you want us to investigate or answer, just tweet them at us with the hashtag AskTheGlobe. I'm Affan Chowdhry. Thanks for watching.